Nero was the emperor who watched Rome burn as he played the lyre, the one who murdered his mother, his wife, and his teacher. A dangerous narcissist obsessed with art, power, and his own image. Nero was not only one of the most controversial tyrants in ancient history, but also a disturbing mirror of modern dictators. In this video, I will tell you who Nero really was, why he went down in history as a symbol of imperial madness, and what there is of myth and truth in the fire that marked his reign and his legend. Nero, the emperor who sang "While Rome Burned," is one of the most controversial figures of the Roman Empire. He was born on December 15, 37 AD in Antium, a coastal city near Rome. His full name was Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, and he came from a powerful branch of the Roman aristocracy. He was the son of Agrippina the Younger, an ambitious and determined woman, sister of Emperor Caligula, and a direct descendant of Emperor Augustus. His biological father died when he was a child, and his mother later married Emperor Claudius, who adopted Nero as his son. Thus, thanks to Agrippina's political maneuvering, Nero was placed in the line of succession. In 54 AD, after the suspicious death of Claudius, possibly poisoned by Agrippina, was proclaimed emperor at the age of just 17. At the beginning of his mandate, he ruled under the tutelage of the philosopher Seneca and the prefect Burro. This first stage was relatively peaceful and moderate. Nero was young, popular among the people, and supported spectacles, tax reforms, and even improved some rights of slaves. His reign seemed promising. Subscribe to my channel if you enjoy my very promising content. You will help me a lot to keep growing on YouTube and creating more and more videos like this one. However, as the years went by, his character changed drastically. He had his mother Agrippina executed, who tried to control him even after she had brought him to power. Soon after, he ordered the death of his wife Octavia too, daughter of Claudius, in order to marry Poppaea Sabina. He also distanced himself from his advisors, such as Seneca, whom he would later force to commit suicide. Nero began to give more importance to his artistic vocation than to affairs of state. He publicly presented himself as a musician, actor, and a poet, something scandalous by Roman standards of imperial dignity. One of the most famous episodes of his life occurred in the year 64, when a great fire devastated much of Rome. The flames burned for 6 days and destroyed buildings, temples, and entire neighborhoods. Legend, spread mainly by his enemies, says that Nero watched the fire while playing the lyre and singing verses about the fall of Troy. Although this image is probably fake, the rumor spread strongly. To deflect Christicism, Nero blamed Christians, a marginal sect at the time, thus unleashing the first great persecution of Christians in the history of the empire. The fire started on the night of July 18th to 19th, year 64, in the Circus Maximus area. It lasted for 6 uninterrupted days and then resurfaced for 3 more days. Of Rome's 14 districts, 3 were completely razed, and 7 suffered severe damage. The houses of Rome were mostly wooden, close together, with no urban planning, which facilitated the spread of the fire. According to Tacitus, Nero was not in Rome at the start of the fire, but at his villa in Antium. He returned immediately and supposedly opened the gardens of the imperial palace to house the victims and organize the distribution of food. Despite that, persistent rumor had it that he had ordered the fire, or at least that he enjoyed it while playing the lyre and singing verses about the destruction of Troy. The sources accusing him, such as Tacitus, Suetonius, and Dion Cassius, wrote years after his death, were influenced by the hostile senatorial view towards Nero. Modern historians consider it unlikely that Nero caused it deliberately, but he did take advantage of the destruction to remodel Rome to his liking. He ordered a reconstruction with a new urbanistic norms, wider streets, use of stone, limited height for buildings, etc. He also ordered the construction of the Domus Aurea, a huge private palace in the heart of Rome, on land that previously belonged to the people. Discontent over his appropriation fueled the resentment of the Senate and the upper classes. To deflect suspicion, Nero blamed the Christians, a marginal group considered strange and subversive. It was the first official persecution against the Christians in history. Many Christians were cruelly executed, crucified, burned alive, or used as entertainment in public spectacles. Some believed that St. Peter and St. Paul were martyred at this time. Towards the end of his rule, discontent with Nero became untenable. Wars, lavish spending, repression, and excessive luxury eroded his power. The army and the Senate began to distance themselves from him, and in AD 68, rebellions began to break out in several provinces of the empire. The most significant one was that of the governor of Hispania, Galba, who was proclaimed emperor by his troops. In response, the Senate declared Nero a public enemy, which in Rome was tantamount to a death sentence. Even the Praetorian Guard, who for years had been loyal to him, withdrew their support. Alone and desperate, Nero fled Rome, accompanied by a few faithful, including his secretary and some freedmen. He took refuge in a villa on the outskirts, owned by his freedman Faun. Aware that his capture was imminent, Nero considered several ways to die. At first, he hesitated, fearful and anguished. He did not want to be publicly executed by the enemies who had previously applauded him. Finally, with the help of his secretary Epaphroditus, he plunged a dagger into his throat. According to Suetonius, his last words were "Qualis artifex pereo," meaning, "What an artist dies with me," a phrase that sums up the aesthetic narcissism that characterized him until the end. He was barely 30 years old when he died. His body was secretly buried by a faithful wet nurse in the mausoleum of the Domitians. Thus ended the Julio-Claudian dynasty, which had ruled since Augustus. After his death, the empire entered an era of political chaos known as the Year of the Four Emperors. But this artist is still alive and you can get some of his artworks. Visit my online store and enjoy it. I leave you the direct link in the pinned comment. Although the Senate and the classical chroniclers remembered him as a monster, the figure of Nero is more ambiguous than it seems. Many Romans of the common people mourned him, and in the following years there arose several false Nero, impostors who presented themselves as the resurrected emperor, especially in the eastern provinces. His fondness for the arts, his narcissism, and his contempt for the traditional forms of the power made him a hated figure by the elites, but also a fascinating character for posterity. Nero was engraved in history as a symbol of excess, of unbridled power, and of the artist who mistook the throne for a stage, but also as the reflection of an empire that was beginning to crack from within. Psychologically, Nero displays many traits of what today we would call a pathological narcissism: excessive need for admiration, lack of empathy, fantasies of power and grandeur, hypersensitivity to criticism, and destructive impulsivity. Although we cannot diagnose him accurately from our time, historians agree that his ego was fragile. His sense of identity depended on applause, and his limitless power isolated him from reality. Nero not only wanted to rule, he wanted to be loved, adored, and eternally remembered. His obsession with art was not just a whim, but a way of projecting himself as a unique and unsurpassed. His power was not enough for him, he needed stage recognition. He was unable to withstand criticism or opposition. Those who challenged him, such as Seneca, his former tutor, or his own mother, ended up dead. This disproportionate reaction to any sign of threat or contempt is typically of narcissistic profiles with paranoid traits. Although Nero lived in a very different world, his psychology and style of power anticipate some traits common to modern authoritarian leaders, especially those with narcissistic tendencies. Nero erected statues and coins engraved with his face and represented himself as a deity or sublime artist. We have seen this quest for idolatry in figures such as Kim Jong-un, Stalin, or Mussolini. Any threat was neutralized without remorse. This is related to authoritarian regimes such as those of Hitler, Franco, Stalin, or Saddam Hussein. Nero uses spectacle as propaganda. He reformed public games and manipulated his image before the people, as many current dictators do by controlling media, networks, or mass events. As he lost favor with senators and elites, Nero surrounded himself with sycophants and cut ties with reality, something common in autocrats who ended up locked in their own circle of power, disconnected from the people and their own officials. In his later years, Nero's exercise of power was purely personal. He made decisions guided by emotions, whims, or suspicions. He did not accept criticism and reacted violently to any threat, real or imagined. His fear of conspiracies led him to act with an increasingly paranoid cruelty. Thus, we can indeed speak of a dictatorial regime, although with a more theatrical than military aesthetic. But unlike the dictators of the 20th century, Nero did not have a defined political ideology. He was not a communist, fascist, or populist. His obsession was with himself, not with changing the world. His regime was not based on a totalitarian plan, but on the cult of personal ego and spectacle, a theatricalization of power that sought more to be loved than feared, until fear became his only tool.